if the product is there, and we always get to the end of August and realise we've got very few teams left in Europe, and we're sitting bemoaning and wondering about this league and whether just because it's bringing in a lot of money for certain clubs, whether it's the right structure for it, Hugh.
Yeah, but as we always go, the structure will not change because of the structure. It's like this. It's almost
Scottish football's 1984 chapter.
Aye, because you've got a structure that ensures that the structure stays the structure. When I'm talking about the voting.
Yeah.
So we're really hit there. And people say, well, bring in an independent regulator. And this is happening in England at the moment, or the moves towards this happening in England. And when that gets towards push or shove, can you imagine the amount of money that'll be thrown in litigation against the government's plans and lobbying? I'm talking about hundreds of millions. Can you imagine Man City, Man United, Chelsea, whatever, all sitting in a wee cabal and saying, they're talking about bringing in a guy or a woman that can tell us what to do? I don't think so. So they'll be, it's a huge, even when you've got some kind of impetus to do it, it's still got huge barriers. So my bottom line is that great saying of the modern young, it is what it is, and it is what it is I think, for the longest foreseeable future. The only thing that can change in Scottish football is a complete restructuring outside of Scotland that impacts on Scotland. By that I mean a European Super League, which opens up possibilities for clubs in Scotland to do other things. England might be more receptive then, or non-top six or non-Super League teams in England might be more receptive to have a cross-border league, etc., etc. That's the only way it changes, Peter.
Yeah, and that's our competition for today on the Journos. See if you can work out what Hugh was talking about with the structure that's the structure that's the structure. Because I was lost by the third structure, but I know.
It can't change because it's inherently resistant to change.
Well, I agree with you because
it's set up so it can't change.
Yeah, the only reason I say that, and listen, the reason I mentioned that is because, we were reflecting in the office, looking back at, starting out as a young journalist, and from my point of view, as a young football fan, looking and loving going to Tannadice. I'm delighted Dundee United are back in the league, but loving going to Tannadice to see really good players that they had, to see Aberdeen contest with Celtic and Rangers. And since 1985, Celtic have won 21 titles and Rangers 18. And since 2000, it's just been an unbelievably dominant Celtic. And to be fair, if you were looking at the way the whole thing's looking at the moment, Celtic is going to take something. It's going to take an investment change to dramatically alter Celtic's dominance of this tournament, because I think it's got the makings of a one-horse race for the next 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I can't see anyone competing with Celtic. Even, there's a lot of noise just now about the fact that Celtic haven't added to the squad. They've got all this money. They've not been successful in recruiting players. I think Brendan Rodgers has been fairly clear about wanting to add quality. They've not been able to do it so far. Even if Celtic were to start the season with this squad, and I think they will have players in, they may lose Matt O'Reilly too, but even without it, you would have to say in a domestic sense, there's no one that you could see touching them. I don't think Rangers have got the resources to compete across the entirety of the campaign. I certainly don't think anyone outside of that would have the ability to compete at all. I think you would have to say in a domestic sense, I think Celtic's dominance at the minute is unparalleled and it's unrivaled. I can't see where a cohesive threat to that would come from.
Yeah, and the one thing about it, and this is where I hope we get an improvement, Hugh, and I think there's a huge responsibility this season for clubs, maybe even managers, because we talked about Steve Clarke and his approach, which may well have altered the way Scotland went about their business. But I think there has to be, in my mind, if we want to see a better quality of football this season. I thought last season the quality of football was absolutely woeful, and it was reflected in a number of performances in Europe, which told its own story, and it was also reflected in the fact that I make a point of going to so many games out with Celtic and Rangers to see what they're doing, how they're competing against each other. And my God, some of the games were absolutely terrible.
They were, I agree with you. And the first point is the only way you can judge the quality of your own league is when your own league plays people outside your league.
Yeah.
That's when you know. Because people go, we've got great teams in the league. Well, wait a minute. You just got beat off Brno, Skokovic 7-2 in aggregate in the third qualifying round of the European Conference League. That tells you a story. So that is the other thing about Scottish football, and it's become really incredibly clear to me over the last couple of years, is that you know that I mean, me going to a big game now would be going to a championship match. I do this feature which is on the road and I go right down the leagues. I'm absolutely stunned by the amount of interest in Scottish football. Not just like, see, if you take it the high end that, you know, Hearts season tickets are out, you know, sold out, I think. Hibs are about 14,000, 15,000. Aberdeen have got, 15,000. I go right down Dundee United, Dundee, all these teams have got really good, and they all know they're not going to win the league. That's a certainty. And they'd all probably get into a cup final.
Yeah.
The fans are not going, let's... but if you go down the league, you can walk into... I walked into Kirkintilloch on Saturday, and there was 900 people at Kirkintilloch Rob Roy v Renfrew in 7th tier of Scottish football.
Yeah.
So what we've got in Scotland is this huge commitment, almost family, visceral commitment to football, but to a product which is it's in decline. It's as simple as it's in decline.
Yeah, we're not getting enough of the home-based players for me being given the chance to play 50 to 100 games. That's the first thing. Sometimes I think the fear of the structure that you're talking about, it actually, as Stephen Robinson said in this studio last season, if I go 3 games playing the way you want me to play and we've lost these games, I'm out of a job. So I get that fear factor that managers are under. And even the overall way that they went about playing their football at times for me was hard to watch. And last season, let's not forget, Alison, we witnessed Aberdeen and Hibs in the bottom half of the table.
I thought last season was particularly poor. I thought when you looked outside of Celtic and Rangers, who both, I think, were fairly inconsistent at points themselves. Celtic, I think, came good towards the end of the campaign and kind of motored on a bit, went through the gears, but there were really turbulent points for every team. But out with Celtic and Rangers, the lack of consistency of any other teams was notable. Yeah. I think teams struggling to piece together any significant run of form, but for clubs like Aberdeen and Hibs not to make top 6 it should be unthinkable.
But you talked about Celtic and Rangers there. I mean, and this is the narrative sometimes that is forgotten from last season from fans, not from me creating a line or you saying something or newspapers or other broadcasters. Fans were saying, since Brendan Rodgers come back, only had 4 45 minutes and 2 half-decent 90 minutes. They had 6 games. Towards the tail end of the season, there was a couple of games where they actually thought, this is good. Brendan Rodgers' Celtic side in pre-season looked good because now he's slowly but surely won everybody over, got the plan of how he wants them to play. But there was no spark for the season for Celtic fans. A lot of them were calling in to phone-ins and talking to us and saying, the football's dire. And the Rangers fans were looking and saying, wait a minute, we've had to suck up games against teams who've been beating us that should never have beaten us.
Yeah, I think for Celtic, I think there was no doubt there was a hangover. At the start of the season, there was a Postecoglou hangover. Everyone had bought into Ange Ball and what he brought and this fantastic domestic success and the way the team were playing football. And then I think just the abruptness of the ending, I think there was definitely a hangover, and then obviously the mixed feelings about Brendan Rodgers returning to the club, and I think the football was a bit different. I think it wasn't the same kind of style. I think Brendan was at pains to point out and show why it hadn't actually differed hugely. People will draw their own conclusions on that. For Rangers, I think obviously a really awkward start to the season, and then you bring in a new manager, and all of a sudden there was a bit of optimism. They looked as though they were going to push Celtic at one point, and then of course when the pressure kicks in, when you find yourself in that position, it was a squad that really struggled to cope with the pressure of where they were, and then the expectation of going on and delivering a title. But I think for long periods last season the football was flat. I think the performances were poor. Again, you would look back at the European performances and results and say they were largely poor. Rangers, I think at points have punched way above their weight in terms of European success. Celtic, I think the Champions League's a different proposition. I think when you go in, the gulf, certainly across the last 5 years, I think the gulf has become incredibly substantial between the elite level and what we have in Scotland, and I think that's reflected in some of the results that you see.
Yeah, and when you get a team that consistently has to sack their manager, you start looking at the boardroom and asking the question whether they're actually clued up on what it needs. And I'm looking forward to seeing Jimmy Tilline's Aberdeen and the high press and the type of player that he's going to recruit, because Aberdeen were murder and have been for 3 or 4 years, and they just haven't got it right, and they haven't got the strategy right, and the players that they've been bringing in.
Incredible turnover of players at Aberdeen. If you look at how many...
It's unbelievable, but you're looking, you're saying to yourself, Hearts, I think, are in a good place. I look at Hibs and I thought to myself, I think Hibs are going down I mean, I like David Gray. I'm a big fan of David Gray as a person. I want him to do well, but I think he's inexperienced. And already David Gray is suddenly, been destabilised by the fact that you've got a Black Knights with 25% saying, oh, we wouldn't have picked the director of football and we wouldn't have gone with that manager either. I mean, what a vote of confidence that is.
I know.
And that's more League Cup result.
And Kelty didn't help either. I think it's interesting. The Tilline thing, I think, is one of those ones where if you're looking at Scottish football and you know somebody, you say, that is a terrific appointment. That's a wonderful appointment. So it's visionary. You're bringing in a guy that's got a strategy, has got a CV in another league, good CV. This is magnificent, great. And this is what the last, we're talking about the opening days of August. This is fantastic, great strategy and all that. October, he loses 4 games.
I know.
Who are these idiots that thought you could just pluck a guy from such and such and such? So that's how it changes.
Yeah.
I mean, last season, and listen, I make no apology for this. I sat here last season, towards the end of the season as well, saying, when we're talking about manager of the year, I think Clement's in for a shout.
Yeah.
How mad does that look now?
Yeah.
At the time,
he could have potentially won a treble.
He could have. At that time, they were favourites. The bookies would tell you favourites for the league.
Yeah.
They were hurting them. So the point I make is, what Aberdeen's got to do now, what Dave Cormack has to do now, is to say, Tilline is what I want. Tilline's ideas are what I want. Tilline's background is solid. There's going to be tough times. There's going to be ups and downs. He's bringing in a new style. People will find the flaws in it, etc. The players know it. And see, when it gets tough in the dog days of October, November, or even towards it, I'm sticking with him. Even if we finish outside the top 6 at the end of the season, I'm saying, right, Jimmy, we go again. Because now that's all right saying that now.
Well,
but when you're in the storm,
when you're sitting on a Saturday afternoon in the director's box and people are screaming at you and screaming, that's when it becomes really tough to say, I'm going to stand my ground here.
Ali, as we get into the 12th year of PLZ soccer, I've never witnessed pundits and players and managers past and present coming in this studio and suddenly saying he's under pressure after 4 games.
Aye.
Honestly, but that's the way it changed. And the whole, you're listening to people. I mean, it's a different kettle of fish for phone-ins because they've always been erratic in their nature. But you look at people now and they're sitting in the stand going, this guy hasn't got it, he's under pressure.
Social media amplifies a lot of the noise too, because and it's interesting because what you tend to have is that you'll go to social media when there's a negativity. What you have is a lot of noise when it's not going well and when people want to vent, and I think that creates some of the pressure now around clubs, and it's a vacuum, or it was a vacuum that wasn't entirely there. Maybe you go back 10, 15 years ago, you might have had your phone-ins and newspaper columns, but it wasn't the same intensity.
Absolutely.
It wasn't the same every second of every day that someone is talking about it and tagging you in it and creating polls, and there is no escape from that at all. And people, managers, players are all telling you, we're not on social media. It's a lie. You can't miss it. You can't possibly be completely oblivious to the fact that that's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be interesting to see top half and bottom half once we get into those cold winter months, and who has managed to hit the ground running. Will it be an Aberdeen? Unless Hibs sort themselves out, could they be under a bit of pressure with a young manager who needs the backing of a board? If I was talking about fans who are happy, might not be happy if the European results don't go their way, but certainly on the basis of last year, St Mirren and Kilmarnock, both with good managers, good solid boards, and they look the most stable of all the clubs that I'm looking at
today.
Yes, absolutely.
Lose your first 3 games of the season.
I agree as well that not only stable, but there is a genuine expectation of stability, because Stephen Robinson just didn't have a good season with St Mirren. He's had good seasons with St Mirren on the back of good seasons with Motherwell. So and McInnes doesn't need any back up. McInnes is, and certainly in Scottish terms, and I would think beyond. I mean, he knows what he's doing. I mean, and the other thing about McInnes at the moment is he always sitting there saying, he's got what he wants in his squad. Managers always want a bit more, but he knows what he's got in his squad. He might lose one or two as the window progresses, but he knows what he wants. And he's got a club, a chairman that absolutely reveres him and respects him. So he's got a real good stability. Football, once it comes into contact with reality, anything could happen. But I'd be very, very surprised if Kilmarnock had any. I saw them get beat at Ayr United about 2 weeks ago as well, but there was no alarm bells. It was just like, it was an early season out and blah, blah, blah. I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Give us your thoughts on the structure of the league, as Hugh puts it, and also what you thought of the football last season. Does there need to be a vast improvement? Does there need to be a change of the way managers go about the playing of the football? Are we trying to be football purists, or is there just a need to try and get better players out there playing a better style of football? Give us your thoughts on that. Of course, Celtic and Rangers fans will have their thoughts on how their team is shaping up. We'd love to hear from you on that, especially in the comments section below, and you can put it across on the app as well. If you get into the comments section, just drop it in there and it drops straight into our server, and we'll see your comments and read some of them out over the course of the season. So lots to talk about this season, and if you join us on the football show regularly on a Monday, Wednesday and Friday, we will have the football show for you at 4 o'clock live. We'll also have the women's football show. We'll have Straight Talk as well. I'll be continuing my one-to-one series, and we've got the Journos, and we'll have special journalists in here talking with us throughout the course of the season. All you have to do is hit the subscribe button. From the overall